The night was heavy, the kind of darkness that pressed against your skin and made every breath feel thick. April 1st, 1970. A date that started like any other in the jungles of Tay Ninh Province, South Vietnam. Private First Class Peter Lemon was just 19. Tired, dusty, and leaning against a sandbag wall, he allowed himself a rare moment of calm. The war was always waiting, but that night, the silence felt deeper. Too deep. Then it began. Mortar fire cracked open the sky like thunder. The earth trembled, alarms screamed, flames lit the treetops. The North Vietnamese army had launched a massive surprise attack on Fire Support Base Illingworth. Peter didn't hesitate. He ran toward the sound of chaos, not away from it. His unit, part of Charlie Company, was being overwhelmed. Dozens of enemy soldiers were flooding through breaches in the perimeter. Adrenaline surged. Peter jumped onto a machine gun and opened fire. Then another explosion, closer this time, threw him backward. His body hit the ground hard, ears ringing, chest bleeding. But he got up, bloodied, injured, half-deaf. He kept fighting. Grenades flew. He tossed them back. Enemy shadows moved fast. He moved faster. Alone, he covered his sector while his brothers fell around him. It was supposed to be the end. But Peter Lemon wasn't finished yet. Peter Charles Lemon was born in Toronto, Canada in 1950. His early life was simple: bikes, baseball, long summers. When his family moved to the United States, Peter embraced the change without hesitation. He grew up in Colorado, surrounded by the Rocky Mountains, where the air was thin and dreams felt high. He was like many boys, restless, energetic, and searching for something more. School didn't always hold his attention, but the idea of serving, of protecting, spoke to him. By the time he was 18, the Vietnam War was on every television screen, every headline, every kitchen table conversation. Peter didn't wait to be drafted. He enlisted. At basic training, he quickly realized war wasn't like the movies. It was sweat, discipline, exhaustion. But he kept pushing. He learned to shoot, to lead, to carry more than just a weapon, to carry responsibility. In his letters home, he didn't talk about fear. He talked about loyalty, about the men beside him, about becoming someone his younger self would respect. Assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, he was deployed to Vietnam in 1969. Still just a teenager, but already changed. The jungle was a world of its own, hot, loud, alive. Death could arrive with a single misstep or a flash in the trees. But Peter adapted. He joked with his squad, built friendships, stayed alert. He learned fast that brotherhood wasn't a word, it was a lifeline. By the time March 1970 arrived, Peter Lemon wasn't just a boy in uniform. He was a soldier, and in less than a month, that title would be tested in ways no training could have prepared him for. Vietnam didn't welcome him. It hit him. The first thing Peter noticed wasn't the gunfire or the helicopters. It was the air, thick, humid, and heavy with tension. The smell of diesel, sweat, and something burnt lingered everywhere. The jungle, lush and alive, was a place of beauty and danger. Everything moved, everything hid. He was stationed at Fire Support Base Illingworth, deep in Tay Ninh Province, near the Cambodian border. Days were long and sticky, filled with patrols, drills, and constant watch. At night, the world changed. Sounds became sharper. Every rustle, every shadow could be death. Peter adapted quickly. He learned how to clean his weapon blindfolded, how to listen beyond the noise. He memorized the layout of the base like it was a map to his own home. He moved with instinct, alert, quiet, focused. The bond with his squad grew stronger each day. They joked in the day, prayed at night, and never let one another eat alone. They weren't just soldiers. They were a shield, a family. But even in routine, danger whispered constantly. Booby traps took legs, snipers took lives, and every night mortar fire was a possibility. Still, Peter remained calm. observant. He knew fear couldn't rule him. Not here. As March turned into April, the tension in the air shifted. Patrols reported unusual movement. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Peter didn't know it yet, but the fight that would define his life was only days away, and when it came, it wouldn't knock. It would explode. April 1st, 1970, just past midnight. Fire. Support Base Illingworth slept lightly, the kind of sleep soldiers know, light, alert, one eye open. Peter Lemon was drifting in and out, boots still on, rifle nearby. Then it began. A thunderous blast shattered the silence. Mortars screamed from the jungle, exploding inside the perimeter. Machine guns opened up. Then came the rockets. Dozens of North Vietnamese soldiers flooded the wire. Chaos erupted. Peter grabbed his weapon and ran. The air was filled with dust, smoke, screams. His platoon was already under fire. Men fell, calling out for help, others returning fire blindly into the dark. Peter jumped into action. He took position at a machine gun and opened fire. The recoil pounded his shoulder, but he kept going, spraying the tree line. He was hit by shrapnel once, twice, but refused to stop. An explosion threw him backward. Dazed, bleeding, ears ringing, he crawled to another machine gun and continued firing. Alone, defending his corner while others lay wounded or dying. Then he ran out of ammo. Instead of retreating, Peter grabbed grenades, pulled the pins, and launched them into the advancing enemy. He could barely stand, he could barely breathe. But still, he fought. He dragged wounded friends to safety. When one collapsed near the wire, Peter limped through enemy fire to carry him back. And then, another blast. This time, it knocked him flat. His leg was torn open. He could hardly move, but he crawled toward the enemy, toward the sound of fire. And with his last ounce of strength, he picked up a rifle and kept fighting. When reinforcements finally arrived at dawn, they found Peter unconscious, bleeding, surrounded by his wounded brothers, and a perimeter that had held. He didn't think he was a hero. He thought he was doing his job. Blood ran down his face. His shoulder burned. His leg was torn. But Peter Lemon refused to give in. He didn't have orders. He didn't wait for permission. He just moved because the men beside him needed him. Because giving up wasn't an option. His first wound had come early in the fight, a piece of shrapnel tearing across his shoulder. The second, when a rocket exploded near the second gun position, driving metal into his side. The third, when he went back to save a wounded soldier and caught a round. In the leg, by all logic, he should have been down. Medics later said it was a miracle he survived the initial blast, let alone the rest. But Peter didn't listen to logic that night. He listened to his instincts, to his sense of duty. He dragged himself through the dust, gritting his teeth with every inch. No strength left, just will. One by one, he pulled injured comrades behind sandbags. When they couldn't move, he crawled to them. When their weapons jammed, he found replacements. He picked up rifles from the fallen and kept shooting. He became a wall, battered, bleeding, but unbreakable. At one point, his breath turned ragged. Vision blurred, his own blood soaked through his fatigues. And still he pushed forward. One grenade after another, one scream after another. A fellow soldier later said it wasn't that he wasn't afraid, he just chose something stronger than fear. Peter collapsed just before dawn. His body finally gave out. But by then, the worst had passed. The enemy was retreating. The perimeter had held. The survivors owed it to the kid who refused to fall. When medics lifted him onto a stretcher, Peter was unconscious but still clutching a rifle. And in that moment, every man who saw him knew, heroes don't always look the way you expect. Sometimes they're just 19. The battlefield was quiet now. Smoke still drifted through the broken trees. The sun was rising, casting soft light over a scene of survival and devastation. Peter Lemon was unconscious when the medics found him. His body was nearly unrecognizable, bloodied, bruised, soaked in sweat and dirt. His right leg was shredded, his shoulder torn. shrapnel still embedded in his side. His rifle was clutched so tightly they had to pry it from his fingers. He awoke in a field hospital 2 days later, surrounded by the sterile smell of gauze and antiseptic. Everything was white and cold. His first question wasn't, "Where am I?" It was, "Did my guys make it?" The doctors nodded. That was enough, but the battle wasn't over. Not inside. Peter drifted in and out of consciousness for weeks. His body was in shock. Sleep brought flashes of gunfire, screams, and falling bodies. Sometimes he woke up with fists clenched, other times with tears on his cheeks. He had survived the impossible, but survival came with weight. He started physical therapy, slow, painful, agonizing. His leg burned every time he tried to move it, but he pushed through. Not because he wanted to be strong, but because he needed to honor those who didn't get the chance. There were days he asked himself why he lived when others didn't. He never found the answer, but he promised himself one thing. He wouldn't waste the second chance. He would carry their memory forward, step by painful step. The day Peter Lemon received the Medal of Honor, there were cameras, applause, and polished shoes. Generals saluted. Reporters scribbled notes. The president placed the ribbon around his neck and spoke of bravery, of sacrifice, of heroism. Peter stood still. His uniform looked clean. His hair was neat, but inside, everything was tangled. He didn't feel like a hero. He thought of the men who didn't make it, of the ones he couldn't save. The faces haunted him. Not just in dreams, but in mirrors, in silence, in every thank you he didn't know how to answer. The medal was heavy, not just on his chest, but in his soul. After the ceremony, he went home and disappeared from the spotlight. He avoided interviews, declined events. For a long time, he didn't even tell people about the medal. He tried to live quietly. Work, family, routine, but the past was never far. Sometimes it came back in nightmares, sometimes in the smell of diesel or the crack of fireworks. He would freeze, breath short, heart racing. Survivor's guilt, the doctors called it. Peter just called it the price of coming home. He didn't want pity, he didn't want praise. What he wanted was meaning, and slowly, with time, he began to understand. The medal wasn't just a symbol of that night. It was a responsibility, a reminder to live, to serve, to make their sacrifice matter. Peter Lemon realized he couldn't carry it all alone. Years passed, but the memories didn't fade. The pain stayed, the guilt whispered. But so did something else, something deeper. A voice that said, maybe what happened wasn't the end of your story. Maybe it's the beginning of someone else's. So he began to speak, not loudly, not as a hero, but as a man who had lived through the worst and still stood. He visited schools, veterans groups, hospitals. He told his story, not with drama, but with honesty, not to glorify war, but to show what it costs and what it gives. People listened. Teenagers who didn't understand war began to understand courage. Veterans who hadn't spoken in years found their voice again. Parents saw their children differently. Survivors saw themselves with a little more grace. Peter's words weren't perfect, but they were real. He spoke of fear, not to hide it, but to show that courage isn't the absence of it. It's moving forward anyway. He spoke of pain, not to relive it, but to remind others they weren't alone. He spoke of brotherhood, sacrifice, faith, and through those words something happened. Healing, not just for others, for himself. The more he gave, the lighter the weight became. He saw his story not as a burden, but as a bridge. A way to reach those still fighting battles no one could see. Peter Lemon, once a silent soldier, became a voice for the forgotten. A reminder that surviving is just the beginning. Peter Lemon survived what few ever could. But surviving wasn't the end of his story. It was the first step in a new one. He rebuilt his life slowly, piece by piece. He earned a college degree, started a family, built a career. From the outside, he looked like any other man. But those who knew him understood. He carried history in his bones. Instead of hiding from the past, he honored it. He wrote books, produced films, and spoke across the country, not to relive the war, but to celebrate life after it. He became an advocate for veterans, fighting for better care, recognition, and dignity. His message was simple. You are not your pain. You are what you do with it. He reminded people that heroism isn't a medal, it's a decision every day to keep going, to lift others, to live with meaning. And that's what he did. To this day, Peter Lemon is the only surviving U.S. citizen born outside the country to receive the Medal of Honor during the Vietnam War. But more than that, he is proof that the human spirit, even when shattered, can rise again. Not perfectly, not without scars, but with purpose. Because sometimes the real victory is not in surviving the impossible, it's in choosing what you do with the life that follows. If the story of Peter Lemon inspired you, take a moment to reflect on the true meaning of courage and resilience. Share in the comments what part of his journey touched you most. Your voice matters here. Like this video to help honor those who've sacrificed in silence, and don't forget to subscribe to American Overcoming. Stories for more powerful, true stories of heroes who chose to rise, no matter how hard the fall.